everybody, I'm Jane Bozarth. I'm coming to you today from Durham, North Carolina, and I hope you're having a great experience at Adobe World so far, Adobe eLearning World so far. I am always delighted to be asked to speak at these, and I am pleased and honored to be back here again today. So let me get some slides up here and we'll get going. When I was approached about doing this, the topic they sent me was engaging e-learning in a post-pandemic world. And I mused over that quite a bit and thought about what that might mean. So I realized maybe I was a little too hung up on the post-pandemic part. I got really on pandemic things. And I'm not sure that ended up being the more important thing for me to focus on. So let me start by talking about some data I have about the pandemic and what we're looking at post-pandemic. I work now for the Learning Guild. I'm their director of research. Some of you know me from my past life in government practice, but I'm with the Learning Guild now. I do research for them. And last year, between March 2020 and February 2021, we did a lot of surveys to find out how the pandemic was affecting our members. Not only their work, but also things like budget, operations, travel, which nearly came to a standstill, as I'm sure you know. So we took a look at that. And, you know, the one thing I think all of us know is that we shifted very quickly last year into what kind of came to be known as emergency remote teaching. You know, we just had to get it done. We couldn't do face-to-face. Lots of stuff happened very quickly. We felt pretty successful with that. And now we're coming out of it, and it's time, I think, to go back and look at what we did really quickly, what worked really well, but also, you know, what we need to maybe redo or tweak or think about doing in a more deliberate, planned way. Good news I have for you is that according to our survey respondents, the future looks really good for us. People felt, if there is a silver lining in the pandemic, people did feel that they were able to hold steady with their technology use, and in some even advanced. We'll look at that in a moment. They felt that learning and development status and visibility were enhanced. They were recognized for having skills. They were recognized for having things they could contribute. In many cases, the L&D department knew more about the technology than sometimes even the IT department did. So they felt that maybe they finally got heard, I think, a little bit better than they felt they had in the past. And they found the changes energizing. Many of them felt that they were finally sort of catching up to others, or they had a chance to get where they wanted to be. Now, that's not true for everybody. I don't mean to minimize those who had a lot of trouble or who did not have great experiences, but overall, our people did report that they felt we were going forward into a good, positive era for learning and development. And this is from a survey Megan Torrance did for us, or wrote up for us. And the light blue, we're looking at technology roadmaps, where people were with their plans. The light blue indicates that they fell behind. The teal indicates that organizations were where they thought they would be. They felt that they had held steady. And the darker blue lines are where they felt they had gotten ahead. And you can see here that in the delivery methods, we did very well with things we were already doing, even if we changed the proportion in which we were doing those things. So virtual classroom did well, e-learning did well, video did well, and mobile learning did well. People were ahead in many cases with that, at least on plan, and didn't feel they were falling behind. But you can see when it drops down lower there, virtual reality, augmented reality, to some extent, chatbots were not going ahead as quickly as organizations had hoped. The same with some of the development approaches, user-generated content, social learning. Curation was doing okay. Agile did pretty well. Using AI for generating content did not advance as much as people hoped. The same down here toward the bottom with machine learning and with LXP and to some extent XAPI. So we did well with the things we were already doing. We leaned into the stuff we do well and backed off a bit from some of the other things. And in many cases, we were able to accelerate what we were doing. I think one thing that was interesting from one of the surveys we did was that 2/3 of the respondents when we asked, what they were designing for, 2/3 said they were designing e-learning, but they were also designing for the virtual classroom. So they were supporting that too. And I was surprised. I will say it was 66% of our respondents said that they were designing for virtual classroom as well. One of the things I think that's clear is that we're not going back. The changes are likely to be permanent. At the left, you see self-paced e-learning. At the right, you see virtual instructor-led. You see that e-learning went up and is likely to hold steady through 2022 and beyond. You see that virtual took a big leap and has started to level off a bit, but it's going to remain that way. I think one thing that was clear from our data, and I thought this was really interesting. We always give people the chance to, we ask, do you have additional comments? Is there anything we didn't ask? We always give them an opportunity to offer text comments. And while we had some people who had challenges with culture, we had some people who had challenges with management or with IT, not a single respondent to all those surveys over a year, not a single one said that the learners did not like or accept the changed delivery formats. So the learners were fine with whatever was happening. They didn't mind the introduction of other approaches. So, one thing I think is a key takeaway for us is that learning and development going forward is not going to look like it did in 2019. We're not going to be seeing that the way we did. So we're not going to see the return to everything being face-to-face or nearly as much being face-to-face. We're going to see a lot more online. And so how did the learners perceive this? We asked around. I checked with some of my colleagues who were in LearnChat one evening and said, what is different? What have been the effects? And I'll give you a moment to look at these. You can see it up at the top there. Jackie is talking about the way the pandemic drove a need for more informal learning. I mean, everybody learned to bake bread, right, in the early days of the pandemic. She learned to make tea from pine tree needles. I would say she's ahead of me in that regard. And someone said, Angela here was saying that she felt that people wanted smaller bits, that they were able to manage themselves, but they wanted some smaller bits, and they wanted some discretion about how long to engage with some of the things that they were presented with. Zolt is thinking he's going to have a lot more, rely on more things like bots and the Internet of Things and algorithms to help him with just-in-time activities, with just-in-time learning. Taruna here in the middle was saying that she felt the pandemic had catapulted, that she had been around for a long time and working remotely for 14 years, but suddenly we came to appreciate the advantages and limitations of online or virtual context. And I think overall we can say that workers became much more aware and educated about their self-directed learning and the sorts of things they had going on and what they wanted to learn and how and when. So in the last 18 months or so, I'm going to keep saying year and a half-ish because that's about what we're up to. There's been a lot of talk about how learning has changed and the learners have changed. I don't know that I agree. I think we hear a lot of times about learners changing, and I haven't seen that they've changed very much in my lifetime. I haven't changed as a learner that much in my lifetime. But back to my original point about being too hung up on the post-pandemic part of the session title, I think I was putting too much emphasis on the post-pandemic issue and not enough focus on the fact that we're learning things that we should have been doing in the first place, right? The pandemic shouldn't have driven that, but that's kind of where we are. Another thing I was looking at was what learner expectations were in post-pandemic learning world. And I've always liked to say, nobody comes to a learning experience hoping they'll be bored. They don't want it to be awful. They may expect that it will be, but they don't want that. So, what are some learning expectations? And I asked a couple of things. I asked, first of all, when was a time a learning experience disappointed you? Why were you disappointed? Why were your expectations not met? Sometimes people don't have realistic expectations, I'll grant you. But in this case, there were things like, well, it was really entertaining and fun, but I didn't learn much. I mean, these are things we've all heard, I'm sure. I was disappointed because I didn't learn anything. There were sometimes simple things. The links didn't work. The policies were out of date. The material wasn't current. The disconnect sometimes between a description of what the class will cover and what the outcomes will be do not match the reality. And that can be very frustrating. I think familiar to all of us in e-learning is the one near the bottom there. I knew the content I should have been allowed to test out. I felt this was a waste of my time. And with traditional training, with face-to-face or virtual classroom instructor-led stuff, people complained that the facilitator was unprepared, they hadn't rehearsed, they didn't know what they were doing, or they spent all their time either apologizing for the pandemic, I'm sorry we have to do this, I'm sorry we're here, I know we would have done this another way, or they're apologizing for the technology. So that's not a good use of anyone's time. They felt that went on too much. So thinking about why somebody was disappointed, but then we asked tell me about an experience that exceeded your expectations. When were you when did it go beyond what you were expecting? And it was when people taught me something I didn't already know. It's when I left feeling like I could go back to work and really do this, not theoretically do this, but really go back and sit down at my desk and do this new thing. The software, I think many of us have had experiences with software training. It is not, it can vary widely in quality. And someone said, it gave us a hands-on experience and the facilitator explained the concepts. They weren't just click next, click next, click next. They also said that they found that the experience that exceeded their expectations involved creative, relevant activities built into the lesson. They were asked to work on their own work. In this particular session in the middle bullet there, they were asked to upload something they were working on or a description of what they were working on so that they could really apply the new ideas and then get feedback. And that lessons were chunked so that I could keep up, I could follow along. And here's my question about all of the things that people said delighted them. Why were these the exceptions? Why are people being sent to learning experiences and when they don't have relevant activities? Or they don't have a chance to work on their own stuff, or they don't have a realistic pacing or chunking for it. I mean, these are things we should be doing, pandemic or not, right? So I would just say, based on what we know about what learners have experienced, what they're saying delights or disappoints them, there's a lot of opportunity here for us. One of our respondents says, sometimes circumstance is our friend. The pandemic presented us with some new opportunities that we are having a chance now to make traditional e-learning better. We have a new appreciation for that. Management is interested in it and recognizes that it's efficient and cost effective. We can help them differentiate the types of experiences. Clearly, everything doesn't need to be a virtual instructor-led session. Maybe everything doesn't need to be just a standalone tutorial. Certainly, everything doesn't need to be face-to-face. I mean, we know that. We have a chance to make digital products better to help people understand it. It may not be a, quote, learning experience at all. It may be something else. It gives us a chance now that we're caught up and moving past sort of the era of panic that we can introduce newer ideas like learning campaigns and help people better understand concepts like workflow learning. Social VR, the idea of social presence got a lot of attention in the last span of time because people found a lot of ways to be together virtually, maybe not in person, but they found a lot of ways to join together and finding a way, we're going to talk about this a little bit more later, but finding a way to help people get a human fix in all of this so they don't feel so disconnected from each other. So the question is, how can we delight them? What can we do that exceeds expectations, that makes them feel like the time was spent well, that makes them feel like they can go back to work and do things? How can we delight people? And I would say, first of all, I think one thing we can do is take a look at and do some things to fix what we've made them get used to in this post-pandemic world we're going into. Here's the thing, they knew it was remote emergency teaching too, right? They understood that this was supposed to be a stopgap and we're just going to do it this way for a little while, and we had to get training out and we're going to go back and fix it. So now that's our job, is we need to go back and look at what we did and whether we need to make some additional changes or put some more thought into the design of what we're doing. One respondent, and I think they said this very well, said, well, we've done great with virtual training. The problem is all we did with that was just replace the face-to-face. And they said, we were just a one-trick pony face-to-face department, and now we're a one-trick pony virtual classroom, right? We're still not looking at alternatives and at which approach is really better. My friend Jennifer Hoffman, who owns NSYNC Training, it's a company that does a lot. I mean, they specialize in designing, developing, delivering, producing live online sessions, webinar type sessions. She said, and this is crazy, in 2019, in all of 2019, they did 29 classes that were 7 hours or longer. In 2020, they did 1,230 classes that were 7 hours or longer. And this year, they're scheduled for 1,943 sessions that are 7 hours or longer. So from 29 to nearly 2,000 is just ridiculous. I don't think any of us ever want to sit in a single class that lasts 7 hours, even face to face, much less expecting people to be online, live and interacting and engaging for that amount of time. I think most of us would question the effectiveness of that. And it's a concern. And if that's what people have gotten used to and come to expect, I think we're going to be in trouble. We need to look at how to override that and get past this emergency doing everything this way kind of thing. So how can we make it better? Let's take a look at how we can make things a little bit better. I would say our first question is to ask ourselves, not how can we teach this, but how can they learn it? Right? What do we need to do to help them learn, and not just quick, we got to get this online somehow, somebody go do that. The first thing I would advise you to think about is to be careful when you are asked to convert, quote, convert something. And instead think about how you can transform that. Converting is what happens when someone walks in with a pile of materials from a traditional, especially face-to-face sort of class. They hand you all the static stuff. You get a PowerPoint deck, you get the lesson plans, you may get some other policy kinds of stuff, but it's mostly static content. And we end up, just shoveling that online. Let me just say this. I know you know better. I know you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about how we can better help manage management and the people that the stakeholders we respond to, and understanding it's not as simple as just point a PowerPoint deck online and narrating it. There's more. So, be thinking about how we can capture the best of the classroom. I'm sure I'm not the first person to say this to you, but particularly in the days when I was with government, I got handed a lot of policy stuff. We had so much policy and so much compliance stuff. It was dry as toast. It was horrible content to work with. And, a dirty little secret in our business is that management didn't really care about a performance outcome. Their performance was, don't break this rule. Don't break the safety rule, don't break the interaction rule, don't break the internet use rule, don't break the email rules. And it was all about, punishment for if you did something wrong. It wasn't really about improved performance. And that gets to be frustrating. But, for all of those topics, for safety, for unlawful harassment, for customer service, for many of the things that the kinds of content we all work with all the time, there's plenty out there. Most of us don't work on brand new from scratch content every day. There's a lot out there. So take a look at it. What is it that a really great facilitator brings to a face-to-face experience? What is it that a great designer did with the internet use policy or the harassment policy or whatever it is you're looking at? What is it? Is it humor? Is it war stories? Is it a great attitude? Is it really interesting examples? What is it? Just a real unique approach or some great activity? Find those things, tease them out, and figure out a way to use them in your own designs as much as you can. Also, just see if you can figure out what is going wrong. If something is really that bad, or it's not working, or it's really dull. This is not, in fact, Mike, the safety guide. This is a just something I found, I think, on Unsplash. But Mike, the safety guy, was a coworker of mine, and he was great. He was a very nice guy. He was perhaps a little obsessed about safety. He was kind of a fanatic, but he kept us real safe. I'm here right now because Mike kept us safe. But Mike was very engaging, and he was really interested in safety until you put him in a room with a projector, and then he began to turn his back to the group and read. It was really tedious and awful, but the moment the man had a PowerPoint slide, he would just start reading to us, and he would turn his back to read the screen to us. It was crazy. So I was in an in-service of Mike's. It was one of the last things I went to before I left that job, and Mike couldn't get his slide deck to work. He couldn't get his slides to display, and I will go ahead and admit I might have been able to help with that. I might not have really wanted to, but this is what happened. Rather than just say, oh, we're not going to do the class today, Mike said, well, okay, let me just show you. And he walked us around to our offices, and he fitted us in our chairs, and he showed us all the different adjustments. There are way more than I knew I had. He looked to see who might need a footrest. He looked to see who needed a keyboard drawer. He looked to see who had terrible posture. It was one of the most useful afternoons of my entire work life. And I apply that information now. I know better than to just go buy a chair because other people said they like a chair. You have to buy the thing that fits you. And I am on the short side of female. So, what a 6 foot tall man likes is not necessarily what I need. So I found it very, very useful. And it happened because we took his slides away, basically, or he couldn't do the thing that had caused it to be so bad. Now, that was an unusual set of circumstances, but I would say you could take a situation like Mike's. You could put him just on a video, go around a building, showing him putting people in their chairs and different adjustments he makes. You could do it live with any product that had, you do it on Adobe Connect, just, with a video feed. Again, Mike doing it with just himself, or maybe bringing in a couple of people, but there are ways to replicate that better experience. I can't tell you how useful I found it. It was one of the best learning experiences of my whole career. So, use the better things to help you make decisions. There's another example some of you may have seen, and I beg your indulgence on that because I still think it's among the best things that I can share. Think for a moment how many of you have worked on or been part of or attended customer service training. I want you to think about some basic rules that you learn for engaging with a customer, just for a second. So probably you're told that you need to make eye contact, right? You're told that you need to speak face to face with someone. You're probably told you need to, they call it matching energy. If the person is excited, try to be a little upbeat with them. You're told to get on the same level they are. If they're sitting down, then you don't want to be standing over them, talking down at them. Sit down too. So there are a number of things like that are just basic customer service tips. You learn them in any training that you would go to. Well, here's the deal. Our county social services office does an enormous amount of customer service training, how to engage with the taxpayers, how to relate to the taxpayers, how not to infuriate the taxpayers. And all of those tips work great 90% of the time, but a little bit of our workforce are the people who drive the county transportation vans. These are people who maybe take folks to medical appointments, maybe take them to recreation centers, maybe take them to adult daycare facilities, those kind of things. And so I want you to think about that van driver who has his back to the customer, who can't really make eye contact unless they're looking at them in a mirror, looking back at them, or looking over their shoulder, who now everybody's wearing a mask, and that makes everything a little bit harder, right, during the pandemic, who can't really match energy. The bus driver's sitting down at the front, and they're sitting down in the back, or maybe they're standing up, or maybe they're in a wheelchair, or and the other thing is, if there's any kind of a kerfuffle, if there's any sort of fracas going on, he has to pull the van off the road and call a dispatcher to say there's a problem and that now they're running late. So there are special circumstances with those van drivers that don't apply to most of the workforce who interact with customers. And all of that is great if you know that thing about the van drivers. But here's the deal. You can have all the PowerPoint decks and you can have the lesson plans and you can have the video, whatever you're using, but nobody thinks to tell you if you've got some van drivers in class, this is how we teach the customer service skills. The instructors know this. It's sort of tacit knowledge that doesn't get written down anywhere. So teaching them how to do those interactions when they can't follow the regular rules is really important. Otherwise, we're just frustrating them and we're not giving them anything useful they can work with. So be thinking about what you might not know and be open to finding those out. Get to the face-to-face if they have it and you can, or talk with people who taught it in an environment that may be different than the one you know about. You would probably be surprised at the things people don't think to document. So be thinking of that. I needed to put this somewhere. I moved this slide 4 or 5 times and I just need to say this. We are right now trending toward what is called the Great Resignation. 40% of American workers want to change jobs. I don't know how that plays out in other countries. I imagine it's big there too. So we're looking at people who are very motivated to get new skills, who are trying to bump up their resumes and that kind of thing. We're also looking at an influx of new hires because that 40% is moving around and many of them may be coming to you, or you may be working on the onboarding material for them. So you need to be thinking about what we need to do to accommodate people who are extremely self-directed, extremely motivated to learn new things. What can we get in their view? I know that may fly in the face of what the organization wants, but it's the reality of what the learners are after, and also how we can support the people coming in. If onboarding takes a big uptick, if we start seeing a big surge of that, how can we make things better, knowing that we may be seeing an increase? This is, again, an opportunity to look at what's happening and see if what we're doing could be a little bit better. This is a personal sort of beef of mine, and you can dismiss it if you want, but I hope you don't. I worked in a hospital for 10 years. Many of our staff, and I would argue in some cases the most important staff, were the housekeepers, the food service workers, the groundskeepers, the paint crew, the electrical crew. I mean, we had all of the trades and that kind of thing. They rarely got any self-development or just personal growth or additional professional growth opportunities. They got sent to mandatory stuff. They got sent to drug awareness and alcohol prevention and safety stuff. Sometimes they were sent to or harassment stuff. They didn't get sent to just the general, again, more professional growth kinds of topics. I worry sometimes that they get overlooked a little bit. And I think sometimes, and when you read around our business, when you read the trade journals, when you read articles, when you read literature, there's a real prevalence of talk about people who sit at desks all day and have access to computers and lots of Wi-Fi and can do pretty much what they need to do during their workday. That's not true of a lot of these kinds of people. For one thing, they don't have a lot of discretion over their workday sometimes. They are not just at a computer all the time with internet. Many of them may not use a traditional keyboard. They may be, mostly working on their phones, or they may have a tablet. And so just keeping that in mind. Also, there may be literacy concerns. They may not be in their first language. There's just a number of things that go on. And I hope that we have an opportunity now to pay a little more attention to that segment of our population and to think about better ways we can provide equitable opportunities for them when we're talking about all this learning we develop. Not everybody's a knowledge worker, and not everybody is just at a desk 9 to 5. We have an opportunity here to do a better job, with blending. I think that we have a chance to rethink some of our instructional design. Anecdotally, And based on our surveys, what I kept hearing was that people were going from one format to another. It had been face-to-face, now it's virtual. It had been face-to-face, now it's an e-learning course. This is a chance to look at where content really can be standalone, self-directed, alone at a computer, doing activities, whatever you're doing, at a time when we do need to add that human fix, where people do need to engage with each other, either physically face-to-face or in a virtual environment, where people do need some human and social contact, where we can provide some tailored interactions. Even if that's just part of the class, even if we learn that we can do part A online and part B virtually, even if we do part B virtually and part C in the face-to-face setting. So figuring out the right blend of that and how we can both meet the organization's needs, get the results we want, save some money, have a more efficient experience, but also, giving people that human and social experience that maybe they need and crave these days, which doesn't just mean being sat in a VILT class for 7 hours, 2,000 of them for 7 hours, but making more judicious choices. Let's see. Figuring out better ways of aligning learning and work. Again, we have an opportunity now to improve and build on what we've already done. I mean, I think I can speak for a lot of us when I say we've been sent to training on software we don't have yet. Software we're going to have someday, software that's ever in beta, but we never really have the final version. But I would say my best example of this, go back to my van drivers, where they're in a customer service class being taught to do things they literally cannot do. They cannot make eye contact. They cannot stop every 5 minutes to turn around and look eye to eye and match posture with another person. So, how can we align what we're doing better with what kind of work these people are doing? We need to look at doing a better job, I think, with workflow learning. And that's not, this is where I think we get in trouble. It means that people don't have to stop working. It's fine if you have performance support, that somebody can stop and go look at a job aid, that somebody can look at a chart on the wall. But we want to get past people having to stop work to go take a 25-minute course in how to do the thing they're doing. We need to start figuring out better mechanisms for that, better ways of leveraging technologies we have. Back to a comment made by a person who said that they were starting to depend more and more on the Internet of Things and APIs to help them execute their work in the moment. Helping people learn to use those things, helping people understand how to fit those things in the workflow, I think is on us to get better at. I got a couple of things here. They're similar. I talk about them separately, but they're not completely different. We need to figure out how we can feed curiosity, how we can help people want to learn more about the thing and not expect everything we build or create to satisfy everything they need to know about something. Workers, as we said earlier, have become more educated consumers of training. So we need to look at ways of providing more self-directed opportunities for them. We can give them projects, we can give them work problems, not filling in every blank, leaving something for them to discover, leaving something for them to work on. Reflection activities, I think that we want to do those. I have not seen much evidence that they get done a lot of times. How we can get people to reflect on how they did something, whether they did it well, what they would do differently tomorrow, what they learned or didn't learn, a time they were disappointed or delighted, those kinds of things. A similar idea that I would line up with this is, I call it creating serendipity. I have found in my own life, many of the things I learned, and I know I learned almost by accident. I learned because I happened to be reading a book about that thing, or I happened to meet somebody who knew about something, or I happened to run across an idea that aligned with something else I knew. It's sort of happenstance. And I think we can create more of those moments for ourselves and others. I think about it as just putting rocks in their path, things for them to trip on: a library, a physical library, an online library, other classes in the LMS. It's like one they just took. If you enjoyed the class on this, go look at the class on that. I don't think we're going to have the data for an Amazon quality recommendation engine. But I think that we can say, well, if you like the work we did with this communication skills class, here's one that does something different with it, that kind of thing. Offer interesting problems that encourage people to explore tools and to work with something they had, making sure they know of what's available. I remember people were always endlessly surprised that we had something in the catalog that we thought we'd marketed really well, and they were like, "Oh, we didn't know you had that." So figuring out how to get, if you've got a course catalog, if you got a subscription to courses, making sure we let people know what they have access to that maybe they're not assigned. Curating things is first of all a way of helping get everything in one place for someone, so they're not looking all over trying to get what they need about a topic, but also it helps you give some new life to existing content. I mean, I think all of us spend a lot of time creating content, and if you can repackage it in a way that gets people to look at it again, or you can give people a more specific view of a topic, I think that's helpful. When I was with government, we had a lot of issues with hiring because we had things that were very specific to government. We had particular preferences. We had things we could and couldn't do in the hiring process. And so just sending people to look at a general HR site was not helpful. It could have gotten them in trouble. So we needed a human to sort of sift through that and recommend maybe 10 things about hiring if you're in a government setting. That's an example of curation that's useful to the learner, and it's something that is not so difficult for us to do, and the learners can help with that. If they find a resource, if they find something interesting, having a place where they can add it or let somebody know to check it out, I think is useful. But another thing here, and we haven't said much about this today, is you need to participate too. You need to be a learner too. You need to be part of the voices that they hear as much as you can. Help open the silo doors for them. Another aspect of learning, especially when we have people who are more self-directed, who may be still working remotely, who may be kind of on their own, who maybe just be checking in or looking for something else, is something we call spin-off learning. It's not necessarily intentional, but it's something we can watch for and maybe enhance. I had a friend who learned about Twitter while he was exploring the idea of personal learning networks. Clark Quinn is a name you probably know. Clark learned about weather and the ocean bottom while he was learning to surf. I have a friend who started a little designer cookie business, ended up quitting her job. It wasn't little anymore. Designer cookie business. And because she started her own business, she needed to learn web design, and she needed to learn photography so that she could better market her products. So, watching for where we have other opportunities to help learners expand sort of their skill sets or expand a particular interest, I think will be really helpful. And it's also a way of keeping them engaged. One of the things that came up when we were talking again with what was going on with some of the conversions and moving existing formats to another format, I would advise you to pay attention to the things that you're clinging to, perhaps out of habit or out of just, this is how we've always done it. One of our respondents, I talked with her on the phone because her text responses were so interesting, said that management was just adamant during COVID that new hires had to sit in a room together to watch this particular safety video. Apparently it's very compelling and emotional, and there's this great story, and management could not be dissuaded until it reached the point that so many people were falling behind and not getting basic orientation training that they just had to finally give in. And the person said, it is a compelling video, but I don't need to sit next to someone who's crying to appreciate the message. So, trying to get them to let go of how we've always done it, the format it's always been in, the fact that they've got to be together, those kind of things. I think we all have them. I don't mean to be putting all this on management, but I think we all have things that we don't want to quite let go, live in another way, and maybe we just have to do it. But be careful of the things that you're just hanging on to. I would say personally, apart from just developing your general skills at some of the things we're talking about, one of the things that came out of the research, and this was additional research on traits leaders have or things that tended to support people as they came through the pandemic were being empathetic and being flexible. You know, understanding that sometimes we got to punt, that sometimes things are not going to go exactly as planned. But people repeatedly said that managers who did well, who they felt were getting their organizations and they're personally getting them through the pandemic, were managers who were flexible and could be empathetic to human needs, that they understood that people are human beings and everybody had a lot of stuff going on. We all had families we were worried about. We all had plans that were canceled. We all had those people with children in school had all kinds of stuff on their plates. People with children who needed daycare had kind of stuff on their plates. So trying to, you know, to understand the human side of that and to be as flexible as possible to offer things that weren't in such a rigid scheduled format was one way to help accommodate some of the problems. But, you know, adjusting policies, adjusting rules, adjusting when they take the test, adjusting how many tries they got, those kind of things are things that are within our grasp, and they help us all kind of get through. So keep thinking about that. One problem that did emerge from the data that I've mentioned before, while people were positive and felt that they were going into a positive future, a number of people said they had a concern about sometimes the speed at which they were doing things, and they were concerned about the lack of evaluation. And you know, one of the things that got mentioned a lot is that we did all this stuff really fast, and the workers were receptive to it, and management was pleased with it, and we got it done. And it's not really what we would have done if we had had time, but it seemed to be fine. You know, all of that is great, and the fact that the workers liked it and management is happy is great, but there's not been a lot of evaluation about whether things really worked. Did we get the performance outcomes we want? People are saying that they haven't done much with that. So if you fall into that category, you know, that's one of the things we need to look at. It's great that we did it, and you know, we managed to stick gum on the little hole and we stemmed the tide for a while, but did it work and did it do any good? And that leads me to another thought as we're coming to the end of our time together. Engagement isn't learning. The fact that it's engaging and fun doesn't mean they learn. Somebody said that early on when we were talking about the times you were disappointed by a learning experience. So we had a great time, but I didn't learn anything. So the fact that it's engaging and interesting itself, that is not the only goal. We also need performance at the other end of that. So making sure that what you do, and I would just say 2 points we've made elsewhere, you know, realistic problems, teaching people things they can really go back and feel like they could do at work, teaching people that they can apply what they've learned. Those are factors of engagement, and they also tie to better workplace performance. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about the word engaging. It doesn't just mean dancing. I always like to make fun of dancing cats. It's not just dancing cats on a screen. You know, another thing is, again, as we're coming to the end, is that there's been a lot of focus, and my title today that I was asked to speak on was about post-pandemic, post-COVID. I think I was approached about this mid-summer. I'm guessing it was probably maybe early July, and boy, howdy, has stuff changed. I don't think we're post-pandemic yet. We have seen since then the emergence of the Delta variant, some other variants. We're talking about additional boosters. We've got hospitals starting to have surges and beds being taken, that kind of stuff. So we may not be post yet. And I would just invite you to take some of the lessons we've learned, try to step down the panic and see how we can continue to work with workforces who may be continuing to leave, people who are continuing to be on lockdown, people who are continuing to be home, perhaps dealing with other family situations. So I don't know, that it may be a little too early. I think it's looking like this is going to have a pretty long tail. So I would encourage us to continue to think about this as being a time of transition for us. But I would also say and I've said this before, I think this is our chance. You know, we're in a situation where management recognizes we have something of value, where we are creating products they feel are effective for them. We need to evaluate this better, but we are recognizing that we need to find better ways of blending. And I think we've learned some ways of selling that idea. We've got workers who have said that even if they don't prefer it, some have said they prefer it. Nobody's saying they don't like it, the new things we're doing. So I do think this is a really unique time for us, and it's a time of opportunity if we choose to take it. So when you think about the slides we looked at earlier about how we can create delight, remember what people said they found was delightful and engaging. I learned something I didn't already know. I got a hands-on experience. It wasn't just a facilitator telling me to click on things. They were explaining things to me. There were creative, relevant activities built in, right? We were able to work on our own work. These are things we could do. They shouldn't be the exception. So there are things that we can do now when we're considering ways of making our products more engaging and helping to delight our learners. I would also just say, kind of as parting words, is make challenging it the norm. We saw a whole lot of things get upended in the last 18 months. If the CEO can work from home, then Bill can work from home. If we can do that meeting online, then why can't we do all the meetings online? If we can do that class via e-learning, then we could do a lot more classes via e-learning. So watch out for the norms. Watch out too for those things you cling to that we just always did a certain way, or we kind of hold sacred, that maybe it's time to revisit, and look for next opportunities. I think it's critical for those of us in the e-learning business to stay on top of technologies, to be an explorer, to be a learner, to try things out, to try to break them. We see that come up time and time again with people who are kind of recognized experts in this business, with people that we talk to who, for instance, have a gift with something like working on a really limited budget. They learn to work the tools. They learn to maximize what they have access to, optimize what they have access to. And, that way, the next time we're in a better position to say, well, we already know about this product, we already know about this tool, we already know that this will work for our workforce, and this is what we would have to do to make that thing work for our workforce. So, don't let the pandemic define parameters for you again. Take the chance now to look for ways to improve your work, to enhance what you're working on, to make the experiences better for everyone involved, including yourself. All right. So I have enjoyed being here with you today. I hope I've given you some food for thought and some ideas for applying to your work. If you're interested in any of the research I mentioned, you can go to learningguild.com, check our research library for what we've got in terms of content there. Everything is free with a free membership, so you can get to anything you want. If I cite something or I have an article that interests you that you can't access, just message me and I will see what I can do. I have copies of just about everything I've ever cited, so I can probably help you out in that regard. But I do a different report every month. Sometimes I interview someone you've heard of, like our friend Julie Dirksen. Sometimes I take on a topic like teaching to generations or teaching the learning styles, and I'll be honest with you, I shoot those down. Sometimes we take on a particular topic. Diversity training was a very popular topic from last year. So I hope you find something useful for you there. But I've enjoyed being with you today. I'm Jane. I'm the Director of Research for the Learning Guild. These are some of my books. And I hope we can see each other in person in 2022. So thanks, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your experience.